Good evening, everyone. I'm Nan Beiter, and I'm co-chair of the Amos Fortune Forum, along with Rosemary Putnam. We welcome you this evening. We have a very exciting presentation for you. Courtney Banghart is a native of the Monadnock region and is coach of UNC's women's basketball team. Courtney is a superstar. There's no question about it. When I was in high school playing half-court basketball, I never dreamed there could be a woman basketball superstar like Courtney. I played half-court basketball, and fast forward about 40 years, and I played again half-court basketball for the Senior Olympics. I was very proud, I lived in Virginia then, that we won the state championship. Of course, we didn't have a lot of competition. But we marched off to nationals, and not much to my surprise, we were seeded last. So we had to play the first seed, which was North Carolina. Well, I spent most of that game on the floor. All 6 points that I scored were from the free throw line. And then I found out that the players on North Carolina's team, Senior Olympics team, had all played for the University of North Carolina. They are a legend in basketball, women's basketball. And so I am delighted to present to you tonight, Courtney Banghart.
Hi, everybody. Wow. Well, I'm certainly glad to be on Zoom, only because it means that 12-hour drive that used to be a 7-hour drive for me has been spared. But Nan, thanks for your patience in trying to track down a college basketball coach. It's not an easy task. And my hope tonight is that there's some meaningful tidbit that makes this night worthwhile for you all. I don't envision that many people on this Zoom that really know a whole lot about what I do, and hopefully I can shed some light into a career that's fun to watch on TV and is pretty gritty on the inside. But as Nan said, I'm a small town New Hampshire girl, and I always will be. You know, I'm originally from Amherst, New Hampshire. My mother actually went to Conant High School, so she is the true native of the Jaffrey area. I got married in Rindge, New Hampshire, so this is home. And I also went to Dartmouth, which is obviously in New Hampshire as well. And so until the age of 29, when I was announced as the Princeton head basketball coach, outside of a 3-year stint in DC, I was basically born, educated, employed in the great Granite State. And so, I ended up at Dartmouth by way of a soccer career that was cut short. And I learned at an early age that following your passion is your key to success. And that story, everyone from New Hampshire plays soccer for the most part. And so I too played soccer, and it was a sport that I was quite good at, and it ended up being the thing that I thought I would do. And so I was looking at soccer schools. I was looking at Boston College. I was looking at Notre Dame. And as my dad can attest, I looked basically everywhere in between about where to go to college. And for me, sport was part of that. Not so much for my parents. They felt education clearly has a little bit more value long-term. But for me, my sport mattered. And so I was looking at going to Dartmouth College because the soccer coach was someone who I thought I could play for. And it ended up, he took the Stanford job when I was in the thick of my recruiting. And so he called me and said, you have a few choices. You can go to Stanford with me, or you can stay on at Dartmouth and be their recruit for their soccer program. To which I thought, nope, I got a third choice. I'm going to call the basketball coach. And the rest is history. So I became a basketball player at Dartmouth and ended up at Dartmouth really because, as my dad would say, sports are not a vocation, which I understand at the time. And hearing your story, Nan, I can see how you might agree with that. But now with 2 Ivy League degrees, one in neuroscience and one in writing and leadership development, I'm now the most expensively educated coach in the country who've done nothing but used athletics to be my vocation. It's the only paycheck I've taken. I've had a lot of coaching jobs that were in the great state of New Hampshire. I was One of my off terms at Dartmouth, I worked at St. Paul's School in Concord, where I taught and coached. Another of my off terms, I was the boys varsity tennis coach at Sauhegan High School, my alma mater. And then, of course, I was an assistant at Dartmouth as well as a basketball coach. So fast forward, I was an assistant coach at Dartmouth and turned 29, defended my graduate thesis all in the same week. And on that week, I was also offered the job to be Princeton's basketball coach. And, for my peers, I asked a lot of my peers and they sort of said, that's career suicide. If you take a job before you're ready, this is not a business that recycles its people. So that's not a great idea. And I thought about that. And I guess I don't look at my journey as a potential failure. I look at it as a series of chapters, right? And so I thought, well, I'm 29. I don't have a whole lot of experience. I'm a soccer player, for God's sakes, and I'm going to go try to be a college basketball coach. At the time, it was the second youngest coach in the country, of which there are 365 Division I programs in the country. And so I thought, God, if I don't like it, or if I get fired, which means I'm not good enough at it, then I'll be young enough to do something else, as opposed to spending my 30s being a great assistant. And then you find out you're not good enough, and you're kind of stuck in it at that point. So for me, it was the opportunity to have a new chapter versus the fear of failure. And I obviously have never looked back. It was a great place for me to start. Like I said, I spent 12 years there, and we had a lot of great success. And that offered me the job to be the head coach at the University of North Carolina. This game of basketball has given me so many experiences. It's given me a ton of heartbreak. It's given me my fair share of stress. It's taken a lot more of of the hours of my day than you might realize, but it's also just brought me an incredible amount of joy. Professionally, I guess what I probably do the most is I pour into the lives of others. And it's for an age group that really holds you to an impossible standard, right? And I'm driven by that. I'm driven by, if you say the wrong thing, they might never talk to you again, right? If you break their trust, they certainly will never trust you again, right? And so you're working with this age group that really holds themselves to a pretty low standard, to be honest, but they hold you to an impossible one. And also it's an age group that that least likes to be controlled, right? And I'm trying to get them to buy into something bigger than themselves. And so you're really that crux between, you're that middle step between them being adults and them being in their homes, and all the things that come with that. Also, it's an age group that lives in comparisons, right? Thanks to social media, right? That might not be a relevant factor for a lot of people on this call, but social media is the new reality. And these are young people that are scrolling their different feeds and sharing their life and their life story on very different and diverse social media platforms. And I'm trying to get them instead to lock in and compete, whereas their whole life is about comparing their lives to others. So I feel like it's a pivotal time in their lives. And it gives me an opportunity to pour into the lives of other people. So that's probably maybe as a holistically what I do. And I'll get into more detail about some of the nitty gritty. Now, interestingly, I've been on every continent except for Antarctica because of basketball. I recruited in Chile, South America, my first month on the job here at Carolina. I helped coach the U22 USA national team in Japan. I've taken teams to Australia, to Europe, and to Africa. And I've even met the president, or actually I didn't meet the president, which is a great story. I was coaching in the NCAA tournament. We had just finished the year 30-0, which is the best record, men or women, that the Ivy League's ever had. And so as an Ivy Leaguer myself, I felt an enormous amount of pressure to win that game, because then once you win the regular season, you go into the NCAA tournament. And if you had done all of that and finished about 13th in the country, and if we did all that and you don't win in the first round of the NCAA tournament, you actually set your league back, I think. So I needed that win more than I needed oxygen, right? And so I just felt like for our league, this was a real opportunity. And it so happens the president's niece is on my team, Barack Obama. And so he was coming to the game because we were playing at the University of Maryland. And so we get to that game, and he arrives about a minute and a half before the game. And usually, I don't know how familiar you're all with basketball, but they take their warm up and all that. And then about a minute and a half to a minute before the game starts, they run towards the bench. And I had just been in the locker room with them. And I had said, there's going to be, 20, 30,000 fans there, about which 250 are going to be yours. So you just lock into where I am, put your blinders on and you dance with the one that brought you and I brought you and I'm going to dance with you because you brought me. Right. And I kind of got into that. And so now I've got a problem, right? Because the president's arriving and he walks by the other team's bench first because that's where the entrance was. And the other coach did what any probably good American would do. And he turned and, kind of shook his hand, reached behind the bench and shook his hand and probably welcomed him to the athletic event. Right. Well, then there's me. And he's walking about 40 feet to get to my bench. And I'm thinking, oh God, what do I do? Because my team's going to be running over here. And I just told them to lock in. Well, fast forward. And I get a question the next day at the press conference, I guess, that night. And they said, so what was it like to meet the president? And I said, I didn't, but we won the game. And so I feel like leadership and coaching leadership is about, like all leadership, it's about doing what you say you're going to do. It's about choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. It's about investing in your people, even when it's not easy to do that. But the game almost allowed me to meet the president. Now, the second time, so we win that game, we're playing in the next round. It was also at the University of Maryland. And the two most recent Supreme Court justices, well, not anymore because we've had two additions since, but two of the women on the Supreme Court justice are Princeton alums. And so I had gotten an email from Sotomayor that said, I want to come, and Elena Kagan, they said, we want to come to your game. And how do we do that? Right. And these are two of the smartest people on the planet. Right. And so I'm thinking, how do you do that? I don't know how to write that. So I'm writing an email and I'm trying to respond with like, well, you go to the ticket desk and you get a ticket and then you go and sit at your seat. That felt not right to send it like that. So I deleted and I tried again. Right. I tried multiple ways to try to help them understand how to get into the game. And I guess I landed on the right thing because I walk out of that locker room and damn if they weren't sitting one row behind my bench. Right. So I was there an hour, we're there an hour early. So was she. So were they. So I say hello and they said, we found it. And I said, you sure did, great seat or whatever. Well, we didn't win that game. So the sport of basketball has also introduced me to some of the great Supreme Court justices. And I should say, not meeting the president, his wife, Michelle, felt, she's a Princeton alum as well. She felt so bad that I didn't get to say hello that she actually gave us a private White House tour. So this game has brought me so many different things. And when I think about that same year, being named the Naismith National Coach of the Year, which is the highest award for our profession. And for someone who majored in neuroscience, who, sports weren't a vocation, that was really something that I thought, God, this is all because I chose to follow my passion. And this is all because of that I guess basketball is a vocation, which is actually another really funny story that I've got to tell you about that hopefully can either make you smile in your own little spot. But we were in the 50 greatest. So I get called that I had been selected as one of the world's 50 greatest leaders. Yeah, that you heard it right. I got a phone call that had been said that I had been named as one of the world's 50 greatest leaders. Now, I hope if anyone on this call ever gets that call, you do what I do, which is you thought it was a joke, right? So I responded. I had this hilarious friend of mine from college. I thought it was her. So I responded with her back and forth, bantering as if it was a joke. On the list is Taylor Swift, Bill and Melinda Gates, Tim Cook, Elon Musk, the Pope, you name it, right? So I'm just going back and forth. I think it's hilarious. Well, then I get, by the end of the phone call, Patty Sellers, who's the editor of the magazine, says, Fortune magazine, she said, Courtney, we've never had such an engaging phone call in accepting this honor. We hope you'll be the speaker at our dinner. I was like, what? So sure enough, I'm the speaker at the world's 50 greatest leaders dinner, which is hilarious. So I show up at the dinner and it's in New York City. And I show up and Katie Couric, it's all assigned seating, and Katie Couric is sitting right next to me. Now, Katie Couric was not on the list, but she was an invited guest. So she's sitting right next to me. And I was like, oh God, I don't even belong here, right? And so she says, we introduce ourselves. And she said, so what do you do? And I was like, oh no, here's the moment, right? I said, well, I work at Princeton. And she said, you work at Princeton? What a beautiful place. And I thought I had, survived. I thought, God, if she asked me what I do I say robotics or something that will make them stop asking questions, right? And she said, so what do you do there? And I thought, oh God, here we go. And I said, I coach basketball. And she said, all day. And so obviously, a lot of people on this call also don't know that coaching college basketball is a 24-hour, 365-day a year job. And it's It's a labor of love, as they call it. But what I spoke about, you should have seen when Patty came by to hand me the microphone. You should have seen Katie's face when she saw that the basketball coach was now the speaker at the dinner. But what I had spoken about was really that life is about, two things, right? I thought to why I was even in the room. And the reason I was in that room is because I had had success leading young people. And I thought about who they were, and they had had success because of who they were and what type of teammates they were. Right. And I was in the room because of who I was and how I was able to help them. And so I talked about how life is about two things, right? Life is about who you are, and life is about who you help. And I've kind of carried that mantra with me throughout my life, is that, you only are who you are. And so be a darn good version of that, and evolve and be thoughtful and ask yourself hard questions and lean on your support network and all that. But who you are matters, and who you help dictates your journey and your impact and your legacy. So coaching is the business of people. It's the business of leadership, but it's really surrounded in basketball. And, I know that people who know me well know that I probably watch 1,000 college basketball games a year on TV, and I probably watch 2,000 on my computer. So it's just a sport I love, but really it's the business of people and the opportunity to be who I am and to help others along the way that has made it what it's supposed to be for me. Even if that does make me the most expensively educated coach in the country. But anyway, so when I think about me, I want to give a lot of gratitude to so many people, but the biggest thing is that we're all a product of our environment, right? There's no way of stripping that. Now, I coach a very wide range of people, right? Basketball is a sport played everywhere. It's not regionalized. It's not saved for one race. It's not saved for one religious affiliation. It's not saved for one socioeconomic background. It's not saved for one sexual orientation. It's not saved for one gender. Men and women play it, right? It's really I'm surrounded by lots of different people, and everybody is a product of their environment. And I can't help but obviously, and especially when I'm speaking to people from my home, just honor that recognizing that my background in my village really raised me in a way that the state provided the glasses in which I see things, what I've experienced, what I've seen. And being a white coach living in a predominantly Black sport, especially at the level I'm at, with a wide range of socioeconomic backgrounds, wider than what I'm accustomed to with my background, and just all the differences I talked about. I maybe don't have the most common background for coaches, but you should know some of the very best in collegiate sport are from our state. The Vanderbilt baseball coach has had a lot of success. The Mississippi State football coach, Dan Mullen, has had a lot of success. Chip Kelly, who was with the Oregon Ducks, as well as the Philadelphia Eagles. New Hampshire is really I think it's a perfect place to be from if this is what you want to do, because maybe not in its proximity to talent, or maybe its similarities to the world I live in, but in the emphasis on people and community, right? You can't be from a small town and not recognize that it takes a village. Right. And you can't, your mailman, right? Your people at the grocery store, where you pick up coffee at the Dunkin' Donuts in town, right? You understand your impact at an early age in a small town. A couple in my influence, I've got Mrs. Miles, and, she grew up I grew up right in a small town, like I said, in New Hampshire, in Amherst, and right across the street was this older woman who had very little electricity, actually went to the bathroom in an outhouse. And I know people are probably rolling their eyes because Amherst, New Hampshire is at least a middle class town, but she had lived really simply and didn't have a car, walked to town every day. And every day when I got on that bus, she was waiting for me. And every day when I got off that bus, she was waiting for me. And she didn't really want to chat a whole time, but she felt like we were her kids. Both my parents were working, and just felt like that she had to kind of take care of the bus stop. And remember, my grandfather came to pick me up one day, and she basically stopped him and was like, "Who are you?" So I just learned at a very young age about the value of that people matter. And so growing up, I think that's how I coach my team now. And I think if you talk to any of my players, and ironically, I have a player from Ringe, New Hampshire, Eva Hodgson, who just graduated in 3 years at William & Mary. And given the COVID year, she actually has a second year. She has 2 years remaining. And so she got into our business school here at Carolina, and she's going to be playing basketball in the ACC at the University of North Carolina. That I can tell you, her doggedness and her relentlessness and her being a part of a community absolutely has triggered her success for us. So when I recruit, I want my players to bring their home with them. I want them to bring their lens with them. And then my job is to get everybody connected. So think about coaching basketball. What I really am doing is helping people from different backgrounds get connected. And as you think about that from a political standpoint, I always think athletics often has it kind of figured out. And if we can continue to be a good influence on those around us, that might solve some of the problems we're dealing with. I will say a couple of the challenges we deal with in our business. I know sometimes people don't realize that what you see on TV, there's a lot the grittiness that comes from it, right? It's a competitive environment, and that can be hard. I've got my own family. I've got 3 small children. I've got an extended family, obviously, not only in Jaffrey and Florida and everywhere else in England. And it's a competitive industry. And so that's fatiguing at times. And so I just have to keep remembering my why, right? I'm making an impact. I'm leaving a legacy. Right? I'm making an impact. I'm leaving a legacy. And on those tough losses or long days or lose a recruit or some of the things that can really set you back, I just keep reminding myself, you're making an impact and you're leaving a legacy. Biggest challenge, a couple of them. Another one besides being in the competitive environment all the time is the concept of, technically as a coach, we're supposed to make our players get better, right? We're supposed to help them grow, stretching them beyond their comfortable limits. That's uncomfortable, right? By nature, that's hard. You're asking them to get by hard, right? But yet you're being kind of judged upon your culture, which is providing a positive student-athlete experience. Well, those two things often work in opposites, right? Stretching somebody, hoping that they can grow, which is hard, with giving them a positive student-athlete experience, right? And so if you think about adversity and how right on the other edge of that is growth, well, we know that because we're older. We've been through enough of it. And until you've been through adversity at a high level, you're afraid of it, right? You don't understand that that's actually exactly what you want, because adversity is when on the other side of that is growth. And that's kind of what I do. College basketball coaches, or really coaches in general, especially at this age group, we're trying to help people understand that adversity equals growth. As I always say, it's a quote I have in my office. It's a quote I say often to our players. It's hard to get past hard, right? It's hard to get past hard. One of the great separators is discipline, right? It's just in all industries, I'm dead convinced that discipline is being disciplined, and having discipline in your life is one of your great separators. Basketball, luckily, is a team sport. I was a pretty good tennis player growing up. I grew up around tennis. My mom played at a high level, and again, being from New Hampshire, you kind of play them all. I grew up going to Jasper Valley in Amherst, New Hampshire. We always joked it was kind of our childcare. I got dropped off at 8 a.m. for swim lessons or swim team. I'm a terrible swimmer, and I probably was on a swim team for 8 years. So maybe they need to work on their swim teaching. But I was a terrible swimmer. But I was there at 8 a.m. and I wouldn't leave till 5. And I was pissed when my dad came to pick us up that he was already there, right? But I played a lot of tennis, and one of the things I didn't like about it is it's so individualized, right? Basketball is a team sport, and there's one ball and 5 people. So 80% of the team doesn't have the ball in their hands. And so we talk a lot about benefiting from the success of others in our sport, and understanding that. How people sometimes want to know how you build a college basketball team, like literally, like quite literally how you do that. If that doesn't interest you, luckily you can just press mute, and I think Jeopardy's on, so you're good. But for the most part, it's 2 ways, one of which is the high school, so scholastic, and one of which is club, which is non-scholastic, right? High school is really targeted. So I would come up and see, I don't know if I actually did ever come up and see Eva. I think I did, Eva Hodson, when she was in high school, but that's really a limited, very targeted approach because there's a very few number of prospects, right? I don't know exactly how many high-level players have come out of New Hampshire, but not a lot, right? I basically live in Chicago, LA, DC, et cetera. New Hampshire's not typically the hotbed for that. So what we do is we find those kids in their club environment. So their spring AAU or non-scholastic environment, just a higher yield. And so you kind of use both. This month, in particular, I'm on the road going to massive events, tournaments that have numbers of kids. I've offered multiple 2026s, which means they're not even in high school yet. And I've offered them full scholarships in the University of North Carolina. And then I've offered kids that are going to be in seniors in high school next year. And what you're doing is once you find someone who might fit your program, you make sure they know that, because if they're good enough, a lot of people are telling them the same thing. I spend hours on the phone. I actually have 2 cell phones. This makes my mom cringe, and I totally get it. But because I'm talking on one and I'm texting on the other. So I can recruit more than one person at a time, and I can be engaged with a very different number of relationships I have to have. So you're on FaceTimes and direct messages. You're constantly in contact because it's a people business, with kids and parents and coaches and kind of the people attached to them. You go into their homes at some point in the process. Where I'll fly up and go into the young person's home and learn more about them. They come into our campus. And so, yeah, it's a fully all intensive process of finding, in our case, 3 or 4 kids a year, that can help your program. And as the great Gino Ariyama, who's the head basketball coach at the University of Connecticut, has said, when I was a young coach doing my graduate thesis work, he said, Courtney, there are 2 types of coaches: those that can recruit and those that get fired. And so there's a lot of truth to that. And so to avoid being fired, because I'm quite happy here in Chapel Hill, I spend a lot of my days recruiting, either on the phone or in person. Fortunately, Carolina has a private plane, so I get to travel a little bit easier than I used to at Princeton. And they both have kind of international brands that are powerful. But we can go as far away as Ringe, New Hampshire, and we can go into the depths of LA, and everywhere in between. So yeah, it's basically a recruiting process that gets your team, and then you go about working on connecting them. COVID was less awesome than you can imagine. I know it wasn't so awesome up there either. But we're used to playing in front of 20,000, 10,000 fans. And we had a total of 40 this year per team. When you're trying to work hard on getting your team connected, and yet the virus is keeping everybody separated. So we would travel. So we take a charter when we go, and we would travel where you'd have no one in the row behind you, and I would be on the window side, and then the person sitting 2 rows behind me would be on the window side. Everyone had single hotel rooms. We actually wore trackers that would beep if any of us got within 6 feet of somebody else. So if I was in that room right now with all of you all, I would be able to tell you exactly who was 6 feet and who wasn't. It's now become such a natural trend for us. But we wore trackers morning, noon, and night all year long, to make sure that we weren't contact traced unnecessarily. So choosing to play through COVID was a big decision, and it came with a lot of responsibilities. But it was, we always say, you set goals and you set them regardless of the obstacles. And our guys had a goal they wanted to play, and so we had to kind of make that work. But playing through COVID was a very unique challenge for all schools, and some opted out, and some humans opted out, even though their teams didn't. We were fortunate that we did not opt out, and we were able to play, and we made it into the NCAA tournament, which was really great. So I talked about some of the challenges. I know there were also some perks, to the job, and there are times where I wonder what they are. No, it's the opportunity to be in an important part of somebody else's life. That you have to remind yourself that there's very few professions that you can really, really at such a high intensity impact other people's life for the better. And I hope the work that we're doing is somehow making our society a little bit better as well, that we do it. Just like I hope that my time with you all is valuable. It's hard when you get presented the option. I remember I was saying to Nan when she first asked me to do this, I said, I don't know why people would be interested in. I'm not totally convinced people are interested in college basketball. But then reading a little bit more about what you guys are doing with the Amos Fortune Forum, there's lots of varying topics. So I feel a little bit more at home in that I'm as odd as most everybody else who has an interest and passion. That's a little bit off the mainstream. So I know I'm supposed to talk for 45 minutes, but I really would way prefer to talk more about what part of the industry you all find more interesting, and whatever, whether it's some of the challenges or whatnot. I'd rather make it a little bit more relevant to what you guys are interested in. So with that, Nan and company, I'll let you guys open the floor if that's something that's doable.
Okay, thank you. If you have questions, write them in the chat. And I have a couple here already.
Okay. Hit me.
One is from back at the beginning of your talk. You said you were at Dartmouth and you lost the soccer coach and you just called the basketball coach, and that was the beginning of everything. What did you say to the basketball coach? Hi, I'm a soccer player. You want me?
No, I got really lucky. So Steve Swanson was the coach at the time at Dartmouth, and he's now actually the head coach at Virginia. And so he was going off to be the head coach at Stanford. And So an awesome guy, and made me really fall in love with Dartmouth. And so luckily the head basketball coach at Dartmouth, her son and I are the same year. So her son played at Hanover High, which is where Dartmouth is. And his girlfriend was on the girls basketball team. And so Sauhegan at the time where I went to school was one of the best basketball schools in the state. And so was Hanover in the same Class I. So for whatever reason, Chris went to that game because obviously her son's girlfriend's on the team. So she had seen me play. It wasn't, my recruiting journey was very different than the recruiting journey that I have now. Like I said, I've been offering 8th graders today and whatnot. But yeah, so what I said is I really want to play college basketball. And she said, are you going to play soccer too? Or do you want to play soccer too? And I said, of course. And she said, well, if you play soccer, you won't be able to start for us because you got a lot to learn. And I said, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. So can I play soccer after I prove you wrong? And she said, sure. And then once I proved her wrong, I just was like, maybe I'll just stick with basketball. I'm doing all right. I'll stick here. Yeah. So it was a very untimely ending to my soccer career, but everything seemed to have worked out okay for me.
Great. I remember from back in the day that there were two kinds of coaches of women's basketball teams. And there were the yellers and the not yellers. Are you a yeller? And if so, do you see the value of yelling?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me. I think obviously I can say whatever will make me sound good, but that doesn't, telling the truth is probably more valued. I'm actually not a yeller, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think partly I'm really cerebral, so I'm actually paying attention to what's going on. I think that's part of it. But I think that one of the things I learned through doing this graduate thesis on the various different, I basically spent 1.5 hours to 2 hours with some of the best coaches in the game of all sports, whether it was basketball or soccer or softball. Like I just picked all these different sports and interviewed in person, like 20 people. And what I picked up from that was really that everybody's very different. Right. So being authentically you, I would say your superpower in the world is being authentic. Right. Authenticity is superpower. And so Pat Summitt, one of our best coach in women's basketball of all time, she had that scary stare. And she was incredibly ornery at times. And, gosh, I'm not going to begrudge her. She won a lot of games. So I'm just wired a little bit differently. So I'm not a yeller. My sports information director would prefer me to have a little bit more emotion. I guess it shows better on pictures. But no, I think I'm a little bit more cerebral, and I'm much more animated in practice than I am in games, because practice is when I'm playing, when I'm doing my work. Playing is when I'm trying to make the adjustments. But I was going to have Eva sign on, but she hasn't played for me yet. So except for in practice, but no, I'm much more of a connector than I am a dictator.
Well, that must stand you in good stead with the next question, which is you were talking about community building.
Yeah. And
the value of it, and the different kinds of people that you coach from very many different backgrounds. Have you run into issues from the divisiveness that exists in the country now?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah, there's a couple different stories I can share. So the first time Colin Kaepernick kneeled was back when I was at Princeton. Remember, I had the president's niece on my team. And so, at Princeton, it's a private institution. You're allowed to have a peacefully protest. And so first I got the okay from the administration that they were going to be okay with a demonstration of some kind. And then we had a really thoughtful conversation as a group where everyone was required to speak and required even more so to listen. And we talked about, we had people whose parents were in the military. We had people who had lost a parent in the military. We have black and white, you name it, Jewish. And it was one of the more moments that I'm most proud of, and how I was able to not be in charge, but be a part of a really meaningful conversation about what that meant, what the anthem meant. And of course, our first home game was Veterans Day. So it just felt like such a stressful time. And so that was the first really, that was the first time that we demonstrated it. And what we decided on was that people were making their own decisions, and yet we wanted a team connected effect and impact. So those who felt they wanted to kneel, knelt. Those that felt they wanted to stand, stood. And what we did was everyone touched the person ahead of them. We looked towards the flag, and everyone was touching. And that was our sign of unity. So that was one such example. And that was we were one of the few teams that were allowing kneeling at the time. And so that was a remarkable year. And of course, this year there was more of that. And this year, again, we had kneelers. And so we had people that knelt and then lifted their wrist in unison with our team. And we had some that stood. And so I think it's so easy to look at conversations and hard realities through your own lens. And I got a lot of people, especially away fans, would email me when they saw our team kneel. People I love and trust had opinions about my willingness to allow people to peacefully demonstrate how they felt about certain things. And I just caution people in general that you don't know someone's reality until you're in it. And as long as they had well thought out intention and meaning, I was okay with it, right? And then you take this Black Lives Matter initiative. Again, being a white coach, my entire staff, I have 10 people in my office suite. Most of them are Black that I work with, that I've hired. And then of course I have almost my entire team. And, you bet I was really thoughtful. And so I did what I know to do, which is ask questions and read and learn a little bit more about what I needed to learn about. And there's a lot of people that are hurting. And, I think sometimes being on a team is about collection, and sometimes being on a team is about understanding that there's a lot of individuals that are trying to get connected and to not lose individuality. So it's been a trying time. Of course, I've coached through the elections. Those are tough days as well, no matter how they turn out, because not everybody's ever always happy. And I love that you asked the question, because it's so easy to look at sport for sport, but we're with these people 365 days a year. I've been in their home and they've been in mine, and so there's a connectedness and an empathy that we meet those interactions with, and they're never easy. But yeah, with the elections and the Black Lives Matter, and we actually wore a patch this year that our kids had made or that they had designed, that we all were a part of talking about what was important. And then we dedicated our season to causes. So what we did is not just Black Lives Matter, but autism awareness, or we called it extra chromosome, extra awesome, and did the Down syndrome awareness, or we did the homelessness, where we all pitched in and made blankets and dropped them off at the homeless shelter, or literacy awareness, where we did Leaders Read, and so every game was denoted to a cause, and our players picked it, and they would educate, but not only the national but the state issue regarding it, whether it was LGBTQ or any number, like I said, any number of things. And then we wore a T-shirt for the games that were on national TV, that were showing that we're promoting marginalized societies or people that need a voice. So yeah, it's been a fascinating time to be a leader, because sometimes they assume because you're in charge, you always know the answers. And sometimes knowing the answers is knowing that you have to give people permission to listen. And I think I've been able to do that pretty well.
When you recruit, you go to the 8th grade, you say. How do you know? I mean, both of the institutions where you've coached, Princeton and UNC, are outstanding academically.
Yeah.
What do you have to look for in an 8th grader for that? I mean, you might recruit somebody and then the university wouldn't let them in,
Yeah, no, that happened at Princeton. No, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't offer kids that young, and I had nothing to offer them, right? It's non-scholarship. I was at a game the other day. This was probably, where was I? Dallas a couple of days ago, wherever I was. And when I say I'm not kidding, the kid was in 8th grade, and she grabbed the rim when she was warming up, like went down to shoot her layup because she wasn't being guarded, and grabbed the rim. She's in 8th grade, right? That kid, I will make sure that kid is smart enough to get in, right? If I have to help her, right? So partly what you're doing at that age, no 8th grader is going to take the scholarship this early, but what you're doing is you're getting in their ear. And so that when they can pull together some resources to come and visit on their own dime, they know it's worth it, because they're going to a place that if they want to go there, it's going to be free. So sometimes you're doing it to show that we're worth your investment. But I wouldn't offer a kid I didn't think could help us. But yeah, I mean, it's not a kid that you're like, I don't know, we'll see. It's a kid you're like, you just held the rim and I witnessed it, and I will make sure you're smart enough. But I would say I probably offered four or three 26s across the country, and mostly it's 22s and 23s. So going to be seniors and going to be juniors that I already know I already have their transcripts and things like that.
Okay, and there's one final one, which is pretty sticky, and that is, have you had to deal with the transgender issue at all?
We haven't. I did have one of my players at Princeton who, after she left our team, she has transitioned. So now she's a he, but it wasn't while we were competing. So I don't know. And I know that we were trying to get a home and home game with UCLA, and apparently at North Carolina, in the state of North Carolina, we are still not as progressive with our bathroom laws. These are all things I've learned. Again, it's funny. People assume I have all the answers, right? But we haven't yet. And I think there's a fear that, I know there's a fear out there that once you allow transgendered people to play on college sport teams, people are going to make those decisions to better their careers. And I don't think that's factual, right? I think this is a real issue. Imagine feeling uncomfortable in your own skin about who you are. I can't actually imagine that, but I can empathize with if that's how someone feels and how that affects their either participation or eligibility. I'm not exactly sure because I haven't dealt with it, but we have dealt with it after exhaustion of eligibility. But I know there's a long process, and these kids are young. When we take them, they're 16 or no, they're 17 or so, and they leave by the time they're 21 or so. So, typically it's happening a little bit later in their life. Although I'm hearing now it's happening a whole lot earlier, in local schools and things like that. But to play a Division I sport, you're probably in the 3%, right? And so that's already a small percentage. And then you throw on top of that someone who's going through transgender, which is also a very small percentage. So I don't think there's been as much crossover as people might have thought.
Thank you very much. And I don't have any more questions. But we thank you. And we do have this wonderful gallon of maple syrup. Which
yes.
I
would have said yes last year had I known I was going to get some maple syrup. You come down to North Carolina and now you get, I can't even tell you what kind of, I guess you can't call it Aunt Jemima's anymore. It's something else now, but it's definitely not New Hampshire. But when I got the kid from Ringe to commit to Carolina, her dad actually sent us our whole staff, some maple syrup, and mine's already gone. So yes.
Oh yes. All right. Well, I will I'm not going to ship it to you, but I will take it over to your mother.
Yes, I will be heading up to the great state here in a couple weeks, and I will get it. And you guys all heard it here. Mom, if you're on, you stay away from that maple syrup. It's mine.
And I want to thank you very, very much. I was very entertained, and I'm sure our audience was too.
I'm happy
I want to say, I want to alert you all to next week, which will be Greg Cunningham, another Jaffrey native, who will be talking about a view from the front lines of the climate crisis. He's an environmental attorney, and he practices in the state of New Hampshire. And I also want you all to remember, when you check out of Facebook and YouTube and go back to the Amos Fortune page, there's a lovely donate button there, which I hope you will press. And remember, when we're virtual, we don't have our begging bowls out. So consider that donate button our begging bowl and be sure to hit it for me. Thank you very, very much. And Courtney, it was a real pleasure getting to know you.
I'm happy to do it, and wishing everybody well in this difficult time. And we're almost there.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.